I really, I mean, I just kind of wanted to open it up for an extra, like, in about an hour of further discussion in the event that people wanted to follow up from last week. But if we could have a focus, I would actually want to maybe talk about what needs to happen to make faction warfare more attractive to those who are not in it.
Easy. Just have people come out. If you have fish there, you're going to have the pyramid. You know, you get the bait fish, then you get the predators.
Right, but like, so a new player can find the faction warfare in the agency. How do we get people to want to, be willing to, and find out information for faction warfare?
That's an interesting question. I think I have a couple of good answers to that. What about you, Woro? I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh no, do you have any idea about this world making faction warfare interesting to new players?
For new players, it's just the low skill point. The low skill point threshold, I suppose, to participate in faction warfare is what makes it attractive.
Right, but how do we make it? How do we get those people to want to do it? Is it an event? Is there something new or additional that can be put in the agency? Is there what can we put in to attract? What could CCP put in, or what could we do better yet that would attract people to faction warfare?
New players, yeah. I just say it's like branding, how we put it out there. Like, if you go to nullsec right off the bat, you're gonna have a lot more of a difficult time, flying an Atron around, trying to tackle people in fleets, as opposed to, being an Atron in faction warfare.
So, somebody's bringing up that a good corp will make the difference for new players in faction warfare. Is there any... Would there be any will for the various different militias to kind of put together one, like, post for, like, Reddit and other places like that would basically function as, like, if you're interested, here are the different militias and here are some of the top people in it? Or would that even make sense?
The problem is what would they have to gain from it? I mean, right now, if you consider the state of the war zone, I don't really see the reason to try to get that many new players.
Well,
what is
to change the war zone?
Would be the yeah, but you would change it by the way it is right now. I don't see in what you could change it. It's going to be again a mindless bunch of people, warping at each other, blowing each other, and then nothing. A system change, then it goes back to the enemies, and it goes back again. It's kind of meaningless. That's the problem.
Yeah, but I would say that from my experience, people who are older players, and no offense, but maybe a little bit more cynical, tend to think the way that you're thinking. And then, but in the end, newer players, like people that are newer to faction warfare, plexing just in and of itself is interesting, as long as it's not completely like farmers and all of the worst that people hear about faction warfare right now. And the real issue is that what faction warfare needs to be good is more people, right? The more people in faction warfare, if all four militias had an organization that was dedicated to warzone control and totally committed to things, I think we could probably like single-handedly make not single-handedly, but collectively make faction warfare great again, as it were. But the problem is that we now have like an Ouroboros problem, right? So if we had more people, then the warzone would be more attractive. But to make the warzone more attractive, we need more people. That's the problem.
No, I would disagree. Go ahead, Dantilli.
Oh no, go ahead.
We still have the motivational problem, and we still have the end game problems. The things that cause the people to be bitter vets and to complain about defensive plexing, uh, actually purposefully neglecting your war zone so that your own investments can increase. That actually brings a lot of complaints from the new players. It's like, wait, why are we losing ground? And they're like, it doesn't matter. Those things don't matter. Only the home systems matter. And then you have the new guys saying, well, that's kind of dumb.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Thank you. When we first joined Faction Warfare, I remember the very first thing we did was take a single system, because like we're a small corp, so we were like, this is what we can do. This is our scale right now. And so we flipped a single system, and then the rest of the militia was like, what are you doing? Don't do that. Now, granted, this is the old style when like you would just plex up every system and then flip them all at the same time. But the truth, like the point of the story is, I understand the emotional response of being told that, because it really is jarring, right? Because and it may be one of the reasons why we have so much problems with people like buying into faction warfare, because you would think it would be really easy, right? It is red versus blue, but with payment, right? Like grab your banner and yell at the other banner. Like this is the simplest thing to get people behind in gaming.
In a game.
And yet we don't do it. And I think that it's because of things like that. Because when you go for it and then you're told, no, actually, it's all just kind of this gamified thing, and now we do
lose instead of win.
Exactly. Then you're just like that idea of like, no, my banner over yours, like that starts to kind of fray and evaporate, I think.
Right now you have a lot of people, they come in, they're pumped, it's I'm ready, let's go. And then you have the commander back there sitting with his his feet kicked up, smoking, and is like, well, he's not willing to say charge.
Oh, it's worse than that. You have a bunch of peasants who are just they are not really fighting. They are just looting the field, and whenever someone comes, they flee. And this is the battle now. There's no battle. There's just a bunch of farmers looting corpse.
The tier manipulation is a little bit too easy, and that's part of the biggest, drawback to flipping the war zone, or de-incentivizing any kind of war zone control.
So
manipulation is the right word.
Last week, I presented my theory about like what was the most impactful things, but I want to know, does anybody disagree with the idea that like the reward structure is fundamentally the problem?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I was going to talk about.
Yeah. I think all plex mechanics aside, even like the citadels and structures, all that stuff aside, honestly, it's all built in to the reward structure. Because the reward structure literally rewards the state that we're in right now, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we need to find something that people would desire in the war zone. In my opinion, that's the problem we have right now. We have nothing that people would dream about, would want, and that they couldn't get anywhere else in EVE.
And that goes back to the thing. Like, I sincerely believe that what we really need is CCP controlled, short-lived campaigns. So certain focus on certain pieces of the Jane Cobb, you're awesome. Certain pieces of the war zone being like the focus for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then what you can do is you can actually put in rewards based on just that time. If you get so many victory points, if you go do so much stuff, then you get various different things. So it's like, well, if you and they may be the same thing each time, right? So maybe there's a piece of clothes or there's a skin that you have to participate in this in order to get.
I don't know, any human controlled objective could result in a conflict of interest.
Mm-hmm.
When I say CCP controlled, I'm not talking about like a person in CCP making it happen, but I mean like not us. The universe should tell us where the focus is.
Oh, then I would kind of state that as a mechanic with kind of random generator.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can see that.
semi-random. It'd be interesting if it was based on like the state of the war zone, actually, places that are not really being applied very much, or maybe places that have been highly contested for a long period of time, or whatever.
I would say that it should serve as a kind of balance mechanism, like the faction with the less space, the less number, will get more event, as a way to balance the situation.
Right, exactly. So that's I think the biggest problem from Go, which is that it is. I'm gonna turn. Hold on, I'm turning off my alert box for now. Okay, so the real problem is that, shoot, I just lost it. Keep talking and I'll hopefully find it. What were we just saying? I got distracted by my own space police.
We are
Something
talking about the
about
reward structure.
Oh, coming back from behind, right? The idea of like joining tier 1 and pushing it upwards is completely not rewarded. I mean, you could say that it is because you get LP while you're, and then
It's punished.
Whatever. Yeah, actually, you're right. It is punished.
Negative 50% LP gains is a punishment.
Right. So I guess so again, just because I stated something, and so just the nuance of it, you could argue that pushing it from 1 to 4 now makes it so that you get to make more LP while it's still kind of suppressed, and therefore you make more money. But I still think that that's a terrible argument. I think that the answer is just there's not enough incentive to come back and too much incentive to hold.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear there is no incentive to come back unless you are in the new phase of the manipulation, like you have been in tier 1 for too long, so you decide that now it's a good time to go to a superior tier. But it's very artificial. It's clearly not done to win. It's done to to manipulate the market and the war zone. So it's not fun, to put it simply.
Yeah, faction warfare is no longer about fighting; it's about revenue.
I do love. I love the idea of like if there are these kinds of ideas of like areas of focus, that it would side on the side that is losing, right? So like right now, Galente would get more of the targeted objectives, and then Caldari would get like defensive objectives, basically.
There would be a way to easily do that without having to favor one side or the other. If you have some kind of system that spawns some kind of random or seasonal event in a random system, if it happens to spawn in that system, it just chooses the attacking side. So if you are losing and the majority of the systems are enemy sides, it's just automatically going to favor the losing side because it's going to favor the oplexing.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of different ways of like implementing that kind of high level idea.
Yeah, but the question is which one would sell more faction warfare to more players? I mean, I think that's a very important question, in my opinion.
I don't know if the person outside of faction warfare really, if they're joining because of the short like this extra incentive, are they joining specifically to be on one side or the other? This actually reminds me of, man, there's another video game now that I think about it. Was it Warhammer? There's an MMO that like relied on lots of PvP, and what they did was it was dynamic. The more one side had over the other, there's just like an automatic bonus that was applied to the other side. So like if Caldari had more active people than Galente, then Galente would have some sort of like additional revenue bonus or something.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you are talking about Warhammer Age of Reckoning.
Yeah, I think that's the one I was talking about. Yeah. Although apparently it was also true in Guild Wars and PlanetSide, so this is nothing new. So that might be interesting. But again, I also like the idea, like, I love the idea of like periods of time, because then you can give reports. There can be winners, there can be, you know, the people contributing, there can be extra prizes that are given only for that thing.
Yeah, I mean, it gives a short-term goal, and that's good. We kind of need more accessible short-term goals in the Warzone, but you also need an overarching long-term goal. Otherwise, people are not going to you know, commit to the long run to faction warfare.
Right. Well, my idea would be that, like, once they come in, if they like it, a lot of them will stay, right?
Yeah, we tried that, and the problem is you can see they have all left for nullsec because they decided they wanted to fly, you know, bigger ships. They wanted to have to fly with people with more SP, you know, those things.
When was this happening? Because I know that, like, in Faction Warfare's heyday, 2014 through 2016, that's how we got a lot of people, was that they would just be trying it out or whatever, and then once we caught them, then they were hooked.
Oh yeah, I can see that with people that were in nullsec and were tired of being F1 monkeys and decided to try faction warfare and found that, hey, I can actually have a fight, a real fight between me and someone else. I can see that happening, but there was also a case of people, you know, who wanted to be in more prestigious, bigger groups with shinier ships, and they just decided to go elsewhere, nullsec, wormholes.
So here's
I cannot give you precise date.
Sure. Here's an interesting question. So the way it stands right now, it feels like there's actually like a built-in cap when it comes to structure and leadership and just how big of an organization can be a faction warfare organization, because of things like you can't text LP, you know, and you're in low sec and you're shut out from a lot of high sec. You know, it creates all these different situations. And so what I see is that eventually a lot of people, especially alliances, once they get to a big enough size, they do move on to things like nullsec and whatnot. Precisely because once a group becomes too large, it almost becomes like incapable of even like being a faction warfare. Yeah, in the same way. Providing enough for their organization members to be able to be competitive in that sort of sense. So the question is this a good thing? I've stated it many, many times over the last several years that it is a thing, and I've stated as if it was a good thing, but is it a good thing? Do we want major alliances, or do we want to not incentivize that?
Interesting. Anyone has any opinion?
While you guys are mulling that over, I want to kick back to something that Lex Hiram said, which is that theme park bonuses don't fit in EVE. So this goes back to what I said last week, which is that, so high sec is all about, you know, the universe gives you your goals, your objectives, how you do things. If you deviate too far, then you get punished, and you know, all that kind of stuff. Like, you are doing CCP's thing in high sec. In nullsec, it's total player freedom, right? The players create their objectives, they create their infrastructure, everything is player controlled. So you have total freedom, but you have to build all of that stuff. Nothing is done for you, right? Faction warfare and low sec feels like it should be that midpoint, right? Where there's this overarching organization that's above you, i.e. your empire that you are sided with, but yet you are free to kind of work towards the objectives however you want, right? So the corporation does their own way for the glory of their thing. So it's like, it's somewhere in between the two. So the idea of like a theme parky bonus may not necessarily be terrible for faction warfare, because again, it's coming from above, right?
I don't know. When you said theme park, that's exactly the idea I had when you started speaking about raining gifts on people for reaching goals. Um, I know that nullsec is not entirely kind of like a from the ground up kind of infrastructure. Too much production comes from highsec, and a lot of it is again getting exported back into highsec.
Well, if I have to give my opinion on this, let me see. Just let me think it through quickly.
Sure. While you think about that, I'm gonna react to. Well, actually, that's a whole nother question. I'm gonna kick that back. Or I'll
Okay,
hold on to pull Max till later. What's up?
Okay, to put it simply, you were talking about the overarching goal of faction warfare, and if we think about it, faction warfare is pretty simple. We have 4 factions. The game gives them to you. The game gives you a reason, like an empire to support, and an enemy. The enemy part is very important because you have your goal. You have an enemy that you have to destroy. You have to take their system, and you have to. And normally the goal should be to have total war zone control. But I think one of the problem we have right now is that we don't have this incentive to totally take the war zone, and that's one of the major flaw we have right now in the design of faction warfare. But pretty much, faction warfare as a goal. The goal is very simple: give a reason for people to fight quickly. Here we give you your team, we give you an enemy, and you can go at it like from day one. The problem is I do not think this thing benefit from too much freedom. At least the same kind of freedom they get in nullsec to build empire,
Right.
because I I fear that it would deviate from the conflict, because the goal of faction warfare is to make sure this conflict happen. It make sure you want to be in that conflict, you want to win, and you create a lot of fight and explosion in the process. So I don't know if giving too much liberty, too much sandbox to people in that system would be a good thing. I don't think it would benefit faction warfare, the system, pretty much.
In my opinion, there's not enough skin in the game for people to want to keep on fighting.
I can agree with that, and that leads to.
I mean, it's not just about rewards. You know, you want to have risks, and right now, citadels and not even having a medal anymore. All that, it's just kind of like it just peters out. No one really has the fire anymore.
I think that's actually something I was going to say, which is that even if it was just like the promise of the medal was guaranteed, that actually goes back to what I was saying about like the short-lived thing, right? Like, so, you know, you don't have to be part of every Warzone takeover. You just have to do it once, and then you get the pretty medal, and then it goes on your shelf, and you've said that you've done it. So that's kind of level of reward, I think, should be more embraced. You know, because I think that although we like to kind of act like we're better than this, I think that in the end, little, you know, trinkets, doodads, badges, medals, titles, you know, these are things that people like.
Or people have fought over less than that in Eve.
Sure. Bayonex, do you have any feedback on that with this before I move on to another point that was made? Bayonex has not had a chance to chime in. I don't know if he's going to, so I just wanted to give him a shot.
Are you here?
Yep.
There we go. I forgot where my push to talk key was.
Yeah.
No, I was. I think the theme park rewards are great. I think CCP had a great idea with Resource Wars, where they had the unique rewards that you could get from those that were bound to your character, the cosmetic items. I think having stuff like that added in faction warfare would be great incentive.
There is a dimension to faction warfare that I think would be interesting. It's the politics dimension. Like the fact that in nullsec they have this capacity to create their empire, and their empire can have some kind of rules. For example, you can create a free port Freeport Empire, or you can create a kind of dictatorship. The goons. I'm not. No, not that. They are totally free. But okay, what I want to say is you can create. You have politics in nullsec that people create from the ground ups.
Mhm.
It would be interesting if in faction warfare you could push the politics of your faction in space and make them materialize. For example, the planet in the system you capture. If you make the Amar capture the system, suddenly you have a bunch of people in chains, things like that.
Well, and on that subject of the actual control, I think one of the things that would really help faction warfare be more enticing is to force people to be in it or not participate in it. And by that I mean all these neutral corps and alliances in the area, all these pirates that show up to your plex and fuck with you, and you can't do anything. You can't shoot first because you'll lose sex status, or like Snuff just drops a shit ton of Titans on your head and you can't do anything about it. They want to own all the moons in the area and farm them all. Just make it restricted. You have to join faction warfare, or you can't put a Moondrow on. You have to join faction warfare, or you can't enter the Plex.
Preach on, brother.
I don't know about you can't enter the Plex, because that severely reduces the level of fights that you get. But I do like the idea of either the suspect flag upon entering, or just making it so that you just don't get standings losses if you're in a Plex, or if you're defensive Plexing. If you're offensive Plexing, maybe you should have to wait to shoot. But if you're defensive Plexing, you should be able to shoot at something that's coming in, because you're defending. And you're on orders to shoot.
Be a difference, or...
I mean, okay, fine. There doesn't have to be a difference, but I was just thinking. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
But in terms of the general health of faction warfare, it's incredibly unhealthy to have a group like Snuff in the area. It's incredibly unhealthy to have giant groups that drops Titans on everyone in the area.
It is.
We all know about this, but it's let's say it's a very touchy subject. But I think we all know that.
Well, the
so
question.
What needs to happen is we need to remove their incentive to be in the faction warfare area.
Well, so here's the problem with that. Like, the idea of like, oh, well, faction warfare is lively, therefore low-sec is lively, and so come here and come and fight us and all that stuff. Like, there's a certain good thing about that. Like, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. Just because Snuff is dropping Titans doesn't mean that it wasn't great to have pirates come into our plexes and fight, right? So
yeah, there's another example of that real quick, Ash, is a little bit more south on the borders of Galente and the Southern Warzone. You have a shadow cartel that lives in Aishi, which is not necessarily a faction warfare system, but is smack dab in the middle, and that's not going to affect any of their potential for signowing in the surrounding area.
Right. So, but the thing is that sites are plex gated, so that should protect people for the most part. I wonder if
marches.
I wonder if there'd be some way to make bashes the iHub, like if there's a way to modify the iHub, or even just dead spaces. See if that's a possibility. But this also goes back. This goes back to the idea of like the faction warfare guys getting Sino beacons, or Sino jammers rather, and this all, the classic argument that like nullsecers might want to move through the area and won't be able to because there's faction warfare people that have jammed the systems. And honestly, I'm at the point to saying, good, like that should be a thing. Like the fact that we own that area and that we are operating in there and we have it to a high enough tier that we can drop that jammer means that yes, you have to come and talk to us if you want to get through that area.
That's kind of the same thing I was saying about the planets and everything too. Like, if your faction is controlling a system, it should feel like you're controlling the system, not just like, oh, there's a flag here. Because right now it's completely meaningless. It needs to feel a lot more like soft. You need, like, your faction needs to actually have control of the system.
The other one I talked about last week was the faction warfare bonuses per system. Change it so like increase it so that the way they're relevant, or at least just make them relevant, and then make it so that they only apply to structures that are owned by a faction warfare organization that owns the system.
You were talking about you were talking about your concept of season objectives. You would have a big objective for a period. Well, a good way to make sure people have a kind of objective would be to have bonuses that happen only in one system during a season, and if you capture the system, this happen or that, it can be anything. But I think it could be a good way to have something like that. And also your idea of sino jamming faction warfare systems, that's totally a era of chaos thing.
That's true.
It would make things very interesting.
Circadian Seeker says we can't afford to let faction warfare people, or they will just say, we can't afford to let faction warfare people control the system and preemptively blamp them. Good, bring it. That's the point. We want people to care about who's winning the war and who owns what. Like, make them care.
But if you affect their scale of escalation and what they're pretty much good at, which might be capital warfare, you're kind of shitting on their ability to respond.
Which I'm going to be honest, I think shouldn't exist in faction warfare space.
I've seen a lot of caps in faction warfare space, and I can tell you some of the best fights I've ever seen were seeing caps everywhere, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's already tons of other places in the game that you can go to get that.
To be fair, we're talking about like needing to have control over the system and have it be up to level 5. So somebody could potentially like knock it down and then make you exposed again. But the whole point of it is, like I said, so if you as a faction warfare group own a system and you decide to not let PL through, and so PL decides to hand 1 trillion ISK to the Caldari state in order to come and take it from us so that way they can come through it. Doesn't that sound awesome?
Or join the club.
Isn't that exactly what you want? Like, that sounds great to me.
I don't know if I want to let the system level Sino jammers be depending on system level, because it's really weird.
It could be something else.
That's a lot of power on the defensive side.
Let me see. What about the kind of faction warfare structure that would allow a faction warfare corporation to Sino jam the system? I mean, you would have another problem in that they could Sino jam the system for the whole faction for everyone.
I mean, a lot of the times you would desire a Sino jammer would be when you're bashing a hub, you know?
Right.
And you're not going to have that option if the system is not upgraded at all.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Quickly, you were talking about the subject of making faction warfare more interesting to new player, approximately.
That's, well, not just new player, but just how do we get people who have never done faction warfare to decide to check out faction warfare?
All right. Personally, I think to put it in the simplest term I can put it, it's we need to create desire for something that only faction warfare can provide. It's really that simple.
Right. And to me, one of the things about faction warfare that's always been, appealing is it's cheap fun, it's quick, a lot quicker than trying to roam through nullsec.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time you get some LP for killing people.
Yeah, LP is good.
So,
LP is something unique.
So here's a question: is the Plex system too complex? But like, is the fact that there's so many different Plexes and they all do different things, or
No way. I think a new player learns how they function within like 10 minutes.
Quickly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just thinking, like, if you because I see things like what Joe Manfu said earlier. He said The elephant in the room is the conversion of skill points for a 10-year-old character versus a 3-day-old alpha.
That's a big thing. That is a big thing. I'm not sure if CCP is capping the skills too low for like advanced weapon upgrades, which is so very important in fitting a frigate and other things like that. I'm not. I mean, maybe CCP can introduce a structure where you can maybe purchase individual skills that can cap all the way, and fuck, I would pay $5 for that if I was an alpha to have weapon upgrade 5. You know?
Yeah. Although I think that that's unfortunately outside the scope of this conversation.
But it plays really important to how effective an alpha feels in the game.
It is true.
Well, at the same time, alphas are like a free trial program. They're not.
But CCP has always said that they don't want it to just be a free trial. They are legitimate playstyles. So
you know how many $5 you can get from alphas if you give them weapons upgrades 5.
Yeah.
Advanced weapons upgrades 5.
So the thing is that like that complaint, like faction warfare is actually really, really good about that, right? Of all of the places in New Eden, it's the only place where you can guarantee that the opponent has to be in a T1 frigate, and it's the only place that you can make money in a PvP ship. Like the idea that a newer player, a month-old player, should be able to understand, get a frigate, go to one of these novice sites, and then run it, right? And so, like,
and pray to the god.
Right. And so Joe Manfu has said that faction warfare isn't that hard to pick up. But again, we have a bit of a selection bias here because we are talking to the people who have stuck with faction warfare. It would actually be interesting to look into the people that didn't stick with it or haven't tried it and why. But my point is that I think that we could more clearly emphasize why people would want to go to faction warfare, what the strengths of it is, and how to access those strengths, right? Get a T1 frigate, go to a novice plex, make some money.
Well, in that case, the clearest thing to do is to make sure that, you know, after you tell them to get a frigate, to go to the novice, they actually get decent, very decent rewards that would make them, you know, that would make people in, you know, with very low SP want to be in faction warfare. Like when they will start the game, someone will come and tell them, okay, you want some fight, you want to advance pretty quickly, and you want to make some good money, go there.
Yeah.
I think all those things already exist. I mean, you just have to get rid of this ridiculous tier system we have right now that makes mission payouts so extraordinarily high, and you have the negative tier 1 rewards, which is like so hurtful for a lot of people that are losing all.
So if you,
including, yeah,
let's say you're not going to have the tier system as it is right now, and therefore you're not going to multiply rewards based on its tier. What would you do to provide Warzone control, or to provide an incentive over Warzone control? I think it would be like, it reminds me of Risk, right? So like every system you own gives you points, but then owning an entire constellation should give you more, and then owning an entire region gives you more, and then based on the number of points that you get you know, paid out for your efforts or whatever. I still don't have the final answer to that question. Anybody want to take that?
You would have to go ahead.
No, go.
I mean, in Risk, is there any kind of system where you get the trade-in cards for reinforcements? Because that shit is so broken. But aside from that, if you were to give bonuses for constellation control, or even down to system control, this is why I push all the time. Like the only single way you can do this so that a single corporation can plug itself into a system, and maybe have the potential for a multitude of corporations to take hubs or claim hubs in a constellation, you would have to make the iHub itself. Sorry.
Okay, you'd have to make the iHub itself. What?
Okay.
Finish the sentence.
Sorry, my little girl was crying. You would have to make the iHub itself the place where you plant your flag as a corporation.
Yes. give ownership of the iHub to corporation, pretty much.
And that's one way you keep neutrals out of it, because the iHub already has the mechanics respective to who can participate in attacking the.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't see right now. I don't see any problem with that. The iHub would also allow the corporation who put it to set the rules of the system, like we are going to cyanogen this system, or this system is going to I don't know, have more of a bonus to market transaction for the faction, something like that.
What prevents a bad actor from taking over a system on behalf of one of the militias and then just basically screwing it?
Yeah, never mind. I say nothing. There is a big problem. Okay.
You would have to give the bonuses to the corp itself. Some of the bonuses, at least, to where they're not touched faction warfare wide, and therefore you incentivize actual real corporations.
Right, but what
to
I'm
take these objectives, and then you have the stakes rising, because then these bonuses are.
So, let's say Valor Accords is going after some systems, and I want to prevent them from taking it. If I'm in the Caldari militia, I can only defend it by attacking them and shooting them and all that stuff. But if I have let's call it AWOXing Galente Corp, I could take that system for this corp and make sure that, and then Valor Accords has no recourse to deal with it. That's one of the biggest issues with faction warfare, is that you're in a militia. You don't get to choose who your allies are. So there could very well be a bad actor that takes it on behalf of them, and if that prevents other groups from the same area, maybe it doesn't prevent other groups. Maybe other people can then decide that they also want to take ownership of the iHub. Hard to say.
There is a clear problem in that. Okay, I'm going to be honest on this. It's very close to something I actually proposed. I made a proposal about it in the Faction Warfare Committee, and it was essentially about giving flags to corporation in faction warfare, and to have them, be able to put them in a system controlled by their faction. But the thing is, it would give them a voting right in deciding when the system would be able to be contested. But anyway, that's not the important thing. The important thing is that if one corporation plants a flag and do something stupid, the other corporation of the faction can just go to war with them and destroy the flag and remove their right to set the rules. So you would need something like that for the high hub. So the problem is you can only have one high hub. So
right. So I'm gonna put a pin on this one, because it's an interesting idea, but it's something that probably needs to be matured, and maybe CCP will look at it and be inspired by it. But I'm actually looking at what Polmek said. Every faction should have a T1 base ship that's free, or a small amount of LP, to militia members, fully fitted with ammo for new players to access at every owned militia station. That's an interesting point, because it also would give something about warzone control, because you're still locked out of the station. So if we put something in the station that's attractive, that isn't in the Citadel, for faction warfare people, then there'll be a reason to want to own that system.
Yeah, who is that guy? He needs to work for CCP.
I hate that idea. I don't like it, because you're gonna have farmers in these in faction warfare corporations.
Oh god, I forgot farmers.
And they're going to get free ships.
Right, but if those free ships don't have stabs and don't, they're just combat ships, like what?
It doesn't matter. They're free. They're free.
Not really free. They cost LP.
Yeah, you could do it for LP.
Then if they cost LP, why don't you just let them take care of themselves, instead of giving them, getting the handouts? You make a lot of LP just oplexing,
Well, okay, so what if, again, this goes back to, what if we blocked it in chunks of time, like a week or whatever, and then after a week it reviews what you've done, and then you get rewarded based on what you've done for that week? And so ships could be part of that. I think that the point that Polmac is trying to say is, like,
That
we
sounds
want to...
very Chinese for me.
Yeah, everybody gets a score? No.
You get your citizen
A faction
score.
warfare score.
Yeah.
My apologies to any Chinese. I love you if you're in Hong Kong.
But maybe that's a good way to get some of these ships available. But
to be, in my opinion, it's a great idea because we were talking about giving something that people desire in faction warfare, and you cannot. It's very good to have something that will be easily accessible to new players. Like it costs a little bit of LP, and that would be unique to the Warzone, like the ship. If you are not in faction warfare, you don't have access to it, you cannot fly it. So it would give something unique and nice. So yeah, it's a good idea. I kind of like it personally.
yeah, I do too. It's an interesting idea. Something to maybe see if it builds up a lot or more. I do want to. So what I was talking about earlier about making things easier for newer players to understand or get attracted to. I'm showing the agency right now for faction warfare, and this is kind of what I'm talking about. So, like, it has this giant image of all of the different banners, and that's pretty and everything, but it doesn't give me any useful information. The most important information, possibly, for a newer player, you have to click on Faction Warfare Systems, and then this complex type, it has a little question mark. Like, this information is hidden. No one's finding this on their own. That should be, like... The problem is that there needs to be something where it's like, these are the strengths of these different encounters. So like it says, join the territorial conflict between four massive empires and New Eden. There needs to be something that says that this is a place for newer players, newer players to get money and fights and combat experience. Like kind of like how faction like ships in the ship browser has little icons that tell you, oh, this is a missile ship, or this is maybe they can make it more clear that this is a group activity, this is a PvP activity, this is a PvE activity, this is a newbie friendly activity, and so this would be a newbie friendly PvP PvE activity. And then when you click on it, it would tell you, like, here are the complexes, these are the restrictions, and have it be more visible. Because honestly, I don't think anybody's seeing these question marks unless they already know what they're looking for.
I'm not familiar with the new panel. Can you explain a little bit more of what you're looking at? What do you mean by question marks?
Well, so there's like more information. So it's like enlisting in faction warfare, and you hover over it, and it's like, to enlist in faction warfare, you need to do this, and it like allows you to go to your character standings and corporation standings because it's explaining the whole standings requirements. And then there's Faction Warfare Alliance, which shows you that Amar is versus Mimitar and Caldari is versus Galente. And that Amar and Caldari are on the same side, and Mimitar and Galente are on the same side. That's an entire box. And then capture mechanics shows system capture mechanics, and it gives you your probe scanner, so that way you could open up and look up complexes. But there's another thing that says faction warfare system that you have to click into. Now you can look up individual faction warfare systems and look for the plexes that are available. But to get the information about the system, or the actually how plexes work, which is, in my opinion, the cornerstone piece of information that people that want to join faction warfare should know, you have to actually come down into the lower left and hover over the middle question mark of the three, and it says complex types, and then, which is crazy because like nowhere else in this screen does it actually say complexes, so you don't actually know what complex type means in relationship to all these other things, because over here these are outposts and installations. None of these are complexes. So either way, complex types, there's novice, small, medium, large, and it shows their restrictions. Once you made it all the way down that, you finally get that piece of information.
There's so many new players that they're so surprised when you show them, like, hey, I don't see any complexes or objectives you're talking about anywhere, and they're unaware that they have to open their scanner to actually access them when they haven't been opened yet. It's all the time.
Right. Yeah. I still want there to be like individual tutorials for specific things.
That's like, what I was just thinking. I mean, if you can put a career agent out there, include them into the beginning, the Navy. No, just in the beginning tutorial missions, if you have one agent suggest like, okay, now get in a frigate and go into one of these systems and open up your probe scanner, enter it, and come back. You don't even have to finish it because you probably wouldn't even be eligible for the ticker, you know. But
Need a faction warfare career agent.
That's such a fucking good idea.
they wouldn't even have to do the ticker. They just have to go there, open it, and then come back.
No, because like, so if there was a faction warfare, so let's say there's an advanced career agent, so career agents that you don't actually have to do, but you can come back and do whatever you want. Faction warfare would be one of these. So then, like, the first one, you have to open up your probe scanner, see that there's a site, warp to it, and then like it could even go all the way through like having you capture a plex in HiSec or whatever, but like it just spawns you your own little
Plex.
Exactly, and just walks through the whole process.
I wouldn't say it would have to be so much as a fake plex without having to introduce too much more work for anyone doing development. You could, like I said, just send them out, have them open an objective anywhere, and get inside of it and come back. And yeah, it could be just like kind of a faction warfare agent out there who wants the help of any capsuleer, and he says, I only need to know if there's, for example, Caldari activity in this area. Check to see if there's any objectives that haven't been accessed, and go inside one and then come back.
I think that faction warfare career agent is probably the MVP from this conversation.
There's something lacking. It's very good because it will give, it will answer the question, how do you join faction warfare and what you are going to do when you get in it, but it doesn't answer the question why you should then join faction warfare. I mean, you can get the information quickly. You can get the information about the fight, like there's a lot of fight there, but then you are going to ask the next question is, okay, I get in this fight, but for what? So I win, but what is for what reason am I winning? For the Empire, for myself, for a ship?
I think that it would be pretty easy to instill like patriotism within the career agent action.
Yeah, without it necessitating any kind of reward at all. You just say, we're in a battle for all this, and we pay you good money, but re-enlistment as a capsuleer for faction warfare is completely voluntary, and he just shows you the button where you can volunteer.
That's a really good idea. All right, well, it's getting to be around the hour mark. We got started a little bit late, but just want to make sure that if there's anything else that we want to touch on before we wrap it up, and then we can go in the next week or 2 weeks or whatever again, and we can keep discussing this.
There's one thing I wanted to mention, if anyone else doesn't have something on top of their head they want to.
Just quickly.
Oh.
If someone else want to say something, I don't know.
I did have a thought that occurred to me. What about going kind of back to those cosmetic things? What about like faction-specific kill marks if you joined a specific faction? That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, cosmetic. Always good to have some pride, faction pride.
I mean, kill marks on my comet are almost there.
I want
some automated medals.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet.
Medals, skins that you can only use while in the militia, skins that are based on ranks. There's a lot of different ideas you can do.
Stuff like that that's not even tied necessarily to LP or tier manipulation or anything like that.
Yeah, we need more dopamine hits on outside of the pure just here's the money, because when everything's about the money, then that's all it's about, right? So yeah, if we can make the controlling of it be more about pride and more about the fancy stuff and like stuff we could show off, stuff you could drop in local or whatever, be like, look, we're better than you. CCP says so. We have this.
Well, the thing about faction warfare is it's inherently RP.
It's true. That's a
really good point. Why should the rewards be tied to money?
That's a good point.
So if if the other faction flips your war zone, they get to force on you one like horrible cosmetic item for
Oh,
2
yes.
months or
The
something.
badge of shame.
Yes.
Golly.
Badge of
You
shame.
make
I don't want the bunny ears. Dang it!
you
Don't
make you
force
make
me.
you make all the Galantis stop their orgy when you capture the system as Caldari. You
There's a
force them to
big
work.
there's a big blue strikeout over your portrait.
Well, all of this is really cool. Oreb, it sounded like Oreb had something else to throw out there too.
Yeah. Aside from the fact that I'm really proud of my medal because I
Hell
feel like
yeah.
I earned it when we fought for that first war zone and even the second take. Fuck, that was hard. And considering I'm a part-time kind of player because I got my family and full-time and all that stuff. This is why I like faction warfare. It's like it's the area where I can come in for an hour and I still have stuff to do. But what was I getting at? Oh yeah, someone had the idea of changing as a fix or patch to the faction warfare missions to have the LP rewarded to missions transfer over to a
A pool.
a a different corporation like the Federation Navy or just like the default Navy corporation in every single faction, so that it doesn't affect the faction warfare LP so much. And I'm not sure if anyone has an opinion on that, but I got a lot to say about that, and I don't like it.
Essentially, you need rewards that aren't tied to ISK.
Not too tight, let's say.
It sounds to me like we're asking for power and trinkets, right? We want to be rewarded by being given more authority over our area, power to project our force into the area that we are operating for on behalf of our militia, and then we also want pretty baubles that lets us know that we did a good job. Does that summarize things pretty well?
No. Aside from the huge amount of LP being easily won by non-participants in the war zone, they're saying that okay, instead of giving them LP in Fed Navy, I mean in the whatever the faction warfare corporation is, you would give it to them in an NPC corp for like running regular missions. I mean that would be a huge nerf to their LP because by default all the things that you buy in those NPC or like mission running corporations is super high. It's astronomical. There's no comparison. They're like at least 8 to 10, 15 times more than what you'll find in the faction warfare LP store. Like in comparison, I think you need like 200,000 LP. I think for a comet. Don't quote me on that, but it's stupid high in comparison to what you need for a comet in the faction warfare LP store. I mean, a lot of people would say, "Oh, that's good because it's a big nerf to missions already from the start," but it doesn't stop the missions, and then there's no talk about missions even still getting their bonus from tier when they're completed. So I'm really confused by that idea, and one of the CSM members has it, and
I don't like it.
I think we
It's-
talked.
it's-
I think that one of the things that we quickly agreed on last week is that missions are so bad that it might just be worth removing them and not even think of another replacement. But there are other one of the things that we discussed was like as the system becomes more captured, maybe new kinds of events or things happen that could be worth different amounts of LP and capture points and all that kind of stuff.
I would prefer that. I would prefer that
Yeah.
that missions spawn by activity and not like willy nilly, and where you can go to any single agent you want, anytime you want, as many times as you want, and do it. And no matter how many times you reject one that is unfavorable, you can bring another one up and still be able to keep your standings up so high that it doesn't really matter how many you reject. And my biggest go ahead.
Glamorex and rejecting mission is just too OP.
I didn't hear that.
Well, yeah, rejecting being able to unlimited reject missions is too OP. I agree with that. But I think that the larger issue is just missions don't really
They're not
faction
fun.
warfare missions just
They're
don't
not a part of
fit.
faction warfare.
Yeah, they just don't fit with the rest of the puzzle.
I mean, it's really good reward for people who are like, hey, you know, I do participate, and then there's nothing really going on right now. There's no fleets. I'm gonna go run a mission or two. I think that's what they're intended for, and a lot of people use that defense for them. But that's whenever you have something like that, it's going to get taken advantage of.
Can I go way out of the box on this topic?
Please.
I think faction warfare missions should be instanced, like the Triglavian proving, and force you to go into a scenario with someone on the opposing militia with an objective.
When you force someone to have some kind of participation by another human player, it's so up in the air. Like, how do you do that? You might spawn that kind of that objective in like an Aussie time zone, and you're just fucking sitting there forever, and nothing's happening. You know?
Yeah, I
Well,
think
I mean, it's a matchmaking queue, right? If you don't come up with anything,
No, man,
you just
you say the forbidden word, instance. It's not going to happen.
I mean, even without that, I like the idea
Why not?
of making it.
Abyssal Dead Space.
I like the idea of
Abyssal
making
Dead
it
Space
about
was
the
a mistake.
systems. No, okay,
I'm
well,
Yep.
No, I'm
Specialized
joking. I'm
combat.
joking.
You'll end up with specialized people who will only do that in like 3 builds.
well, it's also so
Yeah.
gamified, or it can be so easily gamed. That's why I think that also, like, I think that the focus should always be on the systems. Like that should be what matters. And so making the special bonus stuff that you can do that's really fancy be in the systems that are the most contested, I just think that has the most possibility of like causing some chaos.
Interaction. Oh, yeah, quickly, I wanted to talk about actually if I was still thinking about this idea with very ships, faction warfare ships that would essentially be unique to the Warzone. The thing is, those ships would be the best way to, in the description, for example, if you open I forgot the name, the map with the different ships. Can someone fill me in on
The ship tree.
Yes, the ship tree. If you over the faction warfare, you can have one box far from the other for the faction warfare ships. And if you over on this one, a new player would get curious, would see this box and say, what are those? They will try to get the info. In the information, they will see something like, you can only get those ships if you participate in faction warfare. They can do this, and this, and they are very cheap. They are very, they are good, whatever. I think that's a good way to lure people to learn about faction warfare. Suddenly they have the ships they desire. They are going to search for the information to get in faction warfare and to get the ships. I think it's a good avenue to introduce, to make people want to learn and to introduce faction warfare to
Here's a crazy idea. Hold on. Here's a crazy idea. What if, based on that, what if you did it like the Marshal, and made it so that there is a ship that has a bonus based on your faction warfare rank?
Oh, yes, good. I like
After
it.
you untie ranks from missions, sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, this is not these changes are not in a vacuum, right? So
A ship that has bonuses when you're in the war zone.
yeah,
And then militia.
all
So
exciting
the
ideas.
nullsec groups won't, they won't come out and farm it because it's only useful if you use it in the war zone.
Oh, you mean I can't
Actually-
helicopter and nullsec with a faction warfare ship?
All right, so we got time for about one more topic if somebody wants to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't even tell you
Oh.
like my problem was with that. Real quick. I'll
Yes.
get it over with, and you don't really need to give me feedback on it. That thing with the NPC corporation switching like faction warfare LP to just an NPC mission LP, like besides fucking with the LP you need to purchase any item, it's going to cause a lot of anger with mission runners, even though they would clearly not understand that this change would actually benefit them and their LP, because you are killing like the influence that faction warfare LP would have by just stating that faction warfare LP is going to automatically get like this NPC mission running LP instead. That's just going to inflame a lot of people who run missions. It's it, eh, even though they're not going to understand.
Yeah, not only them, to be honest. To anyone looking at this change, it would just seem like enough, like enough for no reason. I don't see any upside to this personally. It just seems like a giant nerf.
It would probably kill a large part of faction warfare.
And a lot of high sec mission runners too.
If they remove if they weren't remove missions, you mean?
Yeah, I think a large part of how it's funded is via mission. Like the people I fly with in MR, they fund it via mission running.
Well, and while I did say that I think that it, removing it is better than nothing, I think that replacing it is definitely the best option with the more engaged in space option. And once again, it goes back to that idea that like faction warfare's strength is the fact that you can do it in a PvP ship. Like
they did it before though, didn't they? The game, the market in the game to get the massive payout for the ship.
Well, what they did there, that was because you got paid based on the value of the ship.
Yeah.
And they were able to manipulate that. But what I'm saying is that like
everything in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and everything in it. So they were able to like take an item that's barely traded and
a hauler.
and trade it back and forth to each other at some extraordinarily high price. So that way it was worth a lot, and then they destroyed it and they got a bunch of LP. But
yeah, what they essentially they did was they manipulated an item that was never traded, and so they would put up for sale and immediately buy it off themselves at a super high price, and therefore manipulating the region price. And then they fill the hauler full of it, full of it, and they would go attack it with Alton and the other militia.
Which is why I said it's about the site. It's about the location still. About the objective.
So what's your guys' opinion on a front line?
What do you mean by front line? Because you go ahead before I spill on this. I don't like hard line front lines, because then you force people to participate in a narrower and narrower space.
So let me explain. Right. So basically, if you just go to default, the systems connecting a Martin Mimitar or Kildari to Galante would be classified as front line. Now you could attack anywhere else. It's just that you'd have a negative buff, so it'd be harder to do it.
Yeah, we talked about this last week too, and I think that the general consensus was that it wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea, but there would have to be some sort of engagement that's interesting for people that are behind enemy lines. So they're like attacking infrastructure behind and then taking territory in the front. But yeah, we did discuss that last week.
Can you capture?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Like one thing they could do is. Do you remember in stations in the olden days you could disable service?
Yes.
Well, why not bring that back?
But the Citadel's people use a third party anyway.
Right, and that's why I was saying that we should take the faction warfare bonuses, make them meaningful, and we should incentivize structures being in faction warfare, because then we have a little bit more control over it. I mean, it's not great. You can still use a neutral third party in order to assault or something like that, but And maybe that's going to be something that we talk about next time or something, like this idea of like structures and is there a solution and is it that bad? But yeah, we're going to that's a huge topic. So let's hold that for next time.
It is one of the biggest topics because Citadels have like, oh my god, I waited 2 years for some kind of official answer. I'm like, what are we going to do with these fucking things? You know, if we take over a system, there's still an enemy Citadel there, you know? And you have to deal with it. And it's like, why trouble with it if this person has the potential to bat fund more people than you can?
Right.
It really fucks on everything. It shits on it. Sorry, my language kind of gets worse with the lower
true.
the bottle goes, but it's the truth. But the best solution that I've heard on this was that you flag your Citadel as participating in faction warfare, one side or the other, or it's neutral. And people who are in faction warfare cannot dock in the neutral Citadels. And the ones that are flagged for faction warfare get these bonuses or penalties applied to their Citadel.
Yeah. I like it. Obviously, we probably want to meet up again. Do we want to do it in a week, 2 weeks? Is this?
It's up to you. I mean, I have the day off on Wednesday, so it's perfect for me.
Well, this was 2 weeks in a row. Was this too quick back to back, or do we want to just see what happens next week?
Next week.
Okay.
If we are talking about Citadels, I'm willing to be there next week.
All right. So that's what I'll do. In fact, I'll post it in announcements right now. I'll say, you want me to do the same time, 2300?
All right. Oh, a bit earlier, but okay.
Tell you what, we will do one of those things where everybody can vote on it again, and we'll see what happens.
All right.
Well, I would really like to thank everyone for participating.
Oh, thank you for organizing.
I wouldn't go that far. It's more like I just have a stream that you guys can come on. No, but yeah, I think that faction warfare is really important, and I think that Hilmar even said that they agree. So it's a really important time for us to be able to lock down what we think is missing, what we think the strengths are, and what could be done to emphasize those strengths while eliminating the weaknesses. I'll see you guys next week then.
Yep.
Thanks, Ash.
Oh, there's one more thing that
Thanks,
I want to
Ash.
clarify before we totally wrap up. It was brought up by Liz. When we discuss taking away missions, we're not actually talking about all missions, specifically faction warfare missions that mechanically operate differently than normal missions. So all you mission runners can go, phew, we're not talking about that.
Yeah, they're completely rewarded differently. Their objectives are different. You can complete it in 5 minutes and 30 seconds. It's really different.
All right. We'll see you guys next week then.
Later.
Cool.
And bouncing back to on air. Whoop. Hey. That was really great.
Welcome back.
Hey, thank you. What is the uptime? So 4 hours and 43 minutes. So around 3 hours. It was about an hour for the. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That was fun. And how's it going, XA Viking? I'm really glad that everybody liked that. Yeah, that's awesome that people were down with that. Maybe I'll end up with a Faction Warfare podcast yet. All right, so where are we at?